Do you really need to pre-wash your fabric before doing a sewing project? And if you do, how exactly do you do it? That's what we're going to talk about today. So there are some sewing projects that suggest that you pre-wash your fabric before you get started. And pre-washing is washing the fabric before you cut, before you trace a pattern, before you sew any seam. So this is something that you need to decide whether or not you're going to do before you start your sewing project. I have been sewing for a really long time. Honestly, I've probably pre-washed maybe about 20% of the time, and that is going to be really dependent on what I am making. So the reason that I don't pre-wash a whole lot is that I do use a lot of upcycled and recycled textiles and fabrics. These are things like old clothing, sheets, old bedspreads, things that have been washed already in their lifetime. So that technically is considered pre-washing. Also, I do a lot of home sewing projects rather than clothing. And a lot of these things are never going to be put in the washing machine to launder because they're not going to get dirty. They're either holiday decorations or they're just going to be something where it's not going to ever need to be washed. If it does, it would be a spot clean. So therefore, I don't really have to worry about pre-shrinking the fabric. And that gets us into what is pre-washing. Pre-washing is essentially just washing the fabric like normal, like your clothes, like your towels, like bedding, just to make sure that it is already pre-shrunk, that the fibers don't shrink anymore, and to get rid of any chemicals and finishes that are on the fabric. And that's pretty often that they are going to be on the fabric. So you pre-wash to pre-shrink, and that is really important because if you are sewing a project and you know that that project is going to be put in the wash at any given time, it could be clothing, it could be a pet item, it could be something for a baby, it could be pillow covers, and you know that they're going to need to be washed. It could be table runners, anything. If that item is going to be put into a washing machine, you need to wash the fabric in the same way that that item would be washed in the washing machine. So if you were to wash something on a delicate cycle, then you would want to pre-wash the fabric on delicate and probably hang it outside to dry. If you are doing like pillowcases and bedding, something that you would wash in very hot water, then you want to pre-wash your fabric in hot water and put it in the tumble dryer, just like you would if you were washing bedding for your home. So in that way, it is pre-shrinking. And when you cut out the pattern, you don't have to worry about the pattern shrinking. You don't have to worry about the seam suddenly puckering and the whole entire project not keeping the shape after you have washed it. Pre-washing is also really important if you are wanting to get rid of chemical exposure, and if you have sensitive skin, or if you are using material and going to be doing something for pets or babies. And I'd say any human. I mean, honestly, I think you need to pre-wash anything that is going to be touching skin. So there is a lot of chemicals that can be used on fabric. There is a lot of like starches to keep it stiff and looking good on the bolt. There can be chemical sizing. There can be excess dyes that are still hanging around on the fabric that will be released, like if you have contact with something wet or perhaps sweat, or especially when you wash it. And again, that's another great reason for pre-washing. If you have a really dark color like this red linen here and some of these colors, there could be excess dyes on that, and you really do want to get that out before you start manipulating and working with the fabric. Otherwise, that dye could transfer onto something else. Even if you don't intend on putting it in the washing machine, it could be in an environment where the dyes are going to transfer. It's also going to relax the fibers of the fabric. So if you have a fabric that is really stiff, That is not going to be the case after it comes out of the washing machine. The fibers are going to be relaxed. You're probably going to have to iron them, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That means that you can work with the way that the fibers are supposed to be. Okay, so if you've determined that you probably need to do some pre-washing of your fabric, probably wondering how you do it, I'm going to walk you through the easy steps. All right, so we said that you want to wash your fabric in whatever way that you're probably going to be washing the finished project. Now, honestly, cotton and normal, that would be good for cotton because cotton can shrink about 5%. You definitely want to get that cotton pre-shrunk. Other fibers, like natural fibers, can shrink up to 10%. So definitely this is an important process, especially if you're making clothing. Now, if you are washing just to remove the chemicals and the excess dyes and to relax the fibers, and you really don't intend on washing this project after it's completed, I would suggest a delicate cycle. That way you have less wear and tear on the fabric and fraying, which we'll talk about in a minute, but you're still able to get the chemicals off. You can also do a hand wash. Do you need to use detergent when you pre-wash? That's totally up to you. I mean, it's a good idea if you want to, but you really don't have to. You just need the water cycle and the movement. If you are going to be using detergent, then I would probably use a lot less than you would with a full cycle of heavy clothing or towels or anything. So just a little bit, which then brings us into how do you pre-wash? So you are going to want to group like colors together. If you are washing more than one fabric, you want to group like fabrics together. If you have two separate types of fabric and one is going to like pill and release a lot of fibers, something like a polar fleece or I don't know, anything that's going to fray really bad, and then you also have just like a general cotton that might not fray as much, you might not want to mix those together, or you might want to put one of those fabrics in a mesh laundry bag, and that'll kind of control all of the fibers that are floating around in the wash water. So this is like what that mesh laundry bag is going to look like, and you can see that it is so small that it's not going to release as much of the fibers and stuff into the wash water. So when it comes to grouping colors, let's talk about that right now. So I have this big stack of fabrics that could be washed. So for this is white, but it has a dark color print. Also white with a dark color print. I would probably group these together. Honestly, I would probably wash all of these together because there's more lightweight colors and not a ton of red. This one has red, but I don't think that it would bleed as much as like a dark red fabric. If you are worried about color transfer, then you can grab, or you can use something like this color grabber. There's a lot of different brands that do this, but this is like a laundry sheet, looks just like that. You put it in the wash and it will absorb the excess dyes. So wash mixed colors and whites with confidence. I'm still not quite confident in doing white with something like this red, but if you are, you go for it. Then you get down into colors like this. While the oranges might not be as bad as the reds, this red I would definitely wash on its own, or combine the red colors together and do this in a wash cycle. Probably going to put this in. This is all going to be for projects coming up. So all of those super deep reds I'm going to put together. I'm also going to put one of these color grabbers in there. And this is what the color grabber looks like, putting it in before washing. And this is what it looks like after with all of the dye that it caught. So when don't you need to pre-wash? Well, you definitely don't need to pre-wash any fabric that is going to be dry cleaned later. Definitely do not do that. Anything that is too delicate to be put into the washing machine, obviously don't be doing that. If you don't intend on washing the project at all, like a bookmark, you don't need to pre-wash fabric for a bookmark. Even like makeup pouches, those might be things that are more spot cleaned. If there's a lot of structure to a project that you're working on, this is usually more with clothing, like a blazer, where you know you're not going to be washing it. It's going to be more of a dry clean project. Then don't worry about pre-washing the fabric for that. And finally, when you do wash your fabric, you are going to have selvage edges, which will not fray. Those are the finished edges. Then you're going to have the raw edges. Don't be surprised if these edges fray. They can start really fraying, especially if you're using a very fast washing machine cycle and doing a lot of tumble drying. You can either just deal with the fraying and cut it off. You could do something like serging the edges to prevent the fraying. You could use a zigzag stitch on the ends to prevent the fraying. You could try putting the fabric in the mesh laundry bags. It'll prevent fraying a little bit, not a ton. You could always finish off the seams and just do a quick rolled edge and fold the fabric over and then over again and do a really quick seam that you might not intend on keeping once you start cutting your patterns out, but it will keep the fabric from fraying. And this is especially important if you have a small amount of fabric and you really don't have the ability to lose any length in dealing with fraying. And this is the linen after pre-washing it. You can see this was the selvage edge of the linen, and then it frayed quite a lot. And this is just a plain red cotton. Again, you can see the selvage edges over here didn't really fray too much. And then this is going to be what the raw edges frayed to. Some of it is okay, and then some of it, again, is pretty extensive. It just kind of gets wrapped up with each other and then just starts pulling. So yeah, I have to cut this off. And then this was a surprising one. This is polka dot fabric, which is a quilter's cotton. This is the selvage edge. Obviously didn't fray, but neither did the raw edges too much. Very minimal fraying. So that is pre-washing. Let me know in the comments if you loved pre-wash or if you do, and if you have any tips on getting your fabric ready for sewing projects. Happy sewing, everybody.